Chapter 30. Arlene stared at him approaching, her mouth open, face pale as a ghost. I didn't want to do it, but she'd made me promise. Feeling sick, I raised my own weapon. I knew what would happen. I would blow the Fing Sob away, and Arlene would hate me for the rest of her natural life, which might not be a very long time at that. Then a miracle happened. Just as my finger tightened on the trigger, Arlene's face suddenly hardened. The color returned. She closed her mouth. Then she pumped a shell into the receiver, shouldered her riot gun, and blew the zombie Dodd's face off. Nobody said anything. Rich took his cue from our awkward silence. I put my hand on Arlene's shoulder, and she spoke. Her voice croaked like a rusty can tied behind a very old car. He was already gone, Fly. And I didn't want him to come between my buddy and me. There was that damned peculiar lump again. I blinked, dust in my eye, I guess, and squeezed her shoulder so hard she winced. But she didn't move to push my hand away. She knew what would happen if I were the one to kill the reworked Wilhelm Dodd, and she wouldn't allow that to happen. Evidently, our friendship was as important to her as it was to me. I'd forgotten that the zombies had ever been human. I made myself forget, but the staring face of Willie Dodd wouldn't let me get away with it any longer. He was a man, a Marine, and very important in my life. Now that he was gone, I didn't know what to think about Arlene and me. Best not to think at all, I advised me. It was good advice, and I took it. Arlene was taking it hard. Sitting on the floor, she put her head between her legs and took a series of long, deep breaths. I wanted to comfort her but felt helpless. Arlene, I reached out to touch her. She shook her head and pulled away. Any other situation, I would have left her alone to mourn in private. But there was no privacy on Dimos except the solitude of the grave. Rich understood what was going on and kept his mouth shut. I liked him more and more. I glanced at my wristwatch, a pointless act in this place. Perhaps, but it helped somehow, a tiny act of useless normalcy. Arlene, I said, gently as I could, we've got to split. You need to pull it together. Leave me alone, she said, keeping her face turned away. Don't look at me. This didn't seem like a good time to push the envelope. I'd never seen her this badly shaken. Without another word, I sat down, back to back with her, and kept watch while she got it out of her system. Rich stood a little farther up the hallway, gun out, eyes averted. Every so often her entire body shuddered. I pretended not to notice. When she finished, she wiped her eyes and stood up. Let's move, Corporal, she said. She was a PFC and I outranked her, but it was all right. The fighting tone of voice was back. Rich rejoined us and we pushed on. Up the defile was a rise where we could peek over the rock wall to our left. The architect from hell had been busy again. A huge garden stretched out before us in the shape of a right hand. We were in the thumb. Can you believe this one? Arlene asked. Better than a swastika, I said. The hand covered a good piece of territory, with the fingers widespread, each undoubtedly offering a wide selection of motion sensors and other surprises. The ring finger had a bizarre, wooden shack right where the ring would have been. I wondered if the pinky finger would be full of Arlene's demons. We started with the thumb. Bet the only prints we find are footprints, Rich said. I've never liked stupid jokes, either, but Arlene laughed. Anything to shake her out of her depression. I heard a familiar bubbling, the red, lava, liquid. The pool was in a raised stone structure that could pass as the swimming pool from hell. I thought I saw a switch just below the lava line. What's that? Rich asked. Toxic yak, Arlene answered. Haven't you seen it before? Rich shook his head. You've been lucky, she went on. Fly and I have been through an ocean of the stuff. Looks like lava, Rich said, proving an old adage about great minds and small circles. Is it hot? Not enough, I said, but it can still kill you. The switch teased me, like a piece of plastic sticking up from a bowl of red oatmeal. You know, I mused, that switch is awfully tempting. I found a rock and pitched it at the button, jumping back. I didn't want any of that spit splashing on me. I should have tried out for the majors when the 12-year strike began. First try was the charm. We heard a loud click, and a door rotated open, revealing our latest take-home pay, another AB-10, and far more important, a pair of beautiful medikits. I would have preferred another of those magical blue health spheres. But this would definitely do in a pinch. But my heart sunk when I picked up the first one and saw the telltale signs of imp. This was not a virgin find. Tooth marks explained why most of the drugs were missing. Apparently the imps liked the taste. A hurried investigation of the kits showed that barely enough drugs had survived for Arlene. Rich helped me gather together what we needed. After cleansing her wounds, with special care for the bad gash in her chest, I gave her painkillers and put on fresh bandages. Rich seemed embarrassed, swabbing at her ample, naked breasts, but titillation was the last thing on any of our minds. "How's that?" I asked. "Better," she said, but I could tell from her strained voice and pale face that she was far from perfect. Better would have to do. The dregs of the drugs proved a bonus for Rich. He didn't look so hot, either. Coming down from the ceiling and snapping out of shock so quickly couldn't be good for anyone, and he'd been holding his own in combat instead of resting. I wish I could have offered him a needle of the stimulant I'd used back in the marble room on Dimos, but stimulants seemed to have been what the imps were. After the vials were all empty, leaving the thumb, we descended on the palm as if storming heaven and began a serious house cleaning, sliding from rock to rock, blasting anything in our way, and scooping up anything useful. The opposition was feeble, hardly worth mentioning except to say that they died quickly. Arlene lucked into finding a rocket launcher of her very own. Then we helped her locate the little battery-sized rockets that were nearby. She collected 7 of the little darlings, and I showed her where to stick them and taught her the forbidden lore of proximity fuses and firing rings. We were so happy about the find that we must have sent out a subverbal signal. Monsters don't like humans being happy. We were ambushed by 6 former comrades at arms and ex-UAC workers. 4 imps, 3 demons, 2 flying skulls, and a partridge in a pear tree. I'm lying about the pear tree. In the ensuing carnage, Arlene used up every rocket. But at least she could never again say she hadn't been checked out on the launcher. Arlene and I barely worked up a sweat. Rich was getting good at the game. He was a good draft pick. He'd been doing some thinking that he was eager to share with us. Arlene still seemed numb from the discovery of Wilhelm, but I was ready to get to know this new Rich better. So, as we surveyed our latest gaggle of X's, I encouraged him to speak his piece. He'd already told us that computers were his area, but he'd been overly modest. Evidently, he was a bona fide computer genius kidnapped from Dimos by the aliens. We had already decided that the gates were hypermass transportation devices, if they really worked and weren't just some elaborate failed experiment from millennia past, it would blow every physics theory we had out the wash. We discovered they responded to bursts of high-energy microwaves. Their circuits responded for several seconds after each burst, not electronics, exactly, but something involving direct manipulations of particle streams. As Rich held court, Arlene perked up and started paying attention. She was getting that expression she wore when a boyfriend betrayed her. Suddenly, her mouth dropped. "You mean you activated the gates yourselves? You turned them on? Jesus Christ, you brought those things here." Arlene had a romantic side that tried to believe whatever nonsense officials put out as the truth du jour. I'd gotten over that sort of silliness long before I joined the Corps. It wasn't a long-term healthy attitude for a jarhead. I think we brought these aliens through the gate ourselves, in a way. Rich admitted pathetically. But it was an accident. "Ah, an accident," I snorted. "Well, that certainly relieves everyone of any personal responsibility," Rich continued, not noticing the irony. "I think, now, that whatever these creatures were, they were listening to the gates. Maybe they were trying to fire it up from their end, and until we answered the phone, they couldn't do it. But, yeah, I guess we let them in. Anyway, I don't believe these are the creatures that built the gates." "That's what we figured," I said. "You got anything more substantial than a gut feeling?" "The UAC has engravings that the gate builders left behind. They are as old as the gates, showing what the gate builders looked like." He paused, trying to find the right words. "And we asked as one. You're not going to believe this," he started. "After what we've been through, we'll believe anything," I said, launching a preemptive strike. "Well, they look like something out of H. P. Lovecraft, he said. I knew it, Arlene said. She still looked furious. Am I the only person in the solar system who never read this guy? I asked, irritated. The first one of you to talk about anything, Eldritch, is going to get a rocket right between the eyes. Rich looked at me like he thought I might be serious, but a big smile from Arlene put him at ease. He swallowed hard and said, they have snake-like trunks with multi-limbed upper torsos, no visible head, and they'd have to move like sidewinders. How big? Arlene wanted to know. Up to 10 meters long, he answered. They didn't say it, but I just know they were both thinking, ooh, Eldritch. I agreed. I'd bet my life we haven't met the real intelligence behind this. Arlene joined in, bet something of more value than that fly. What value do you think an insurance company would put on us? I don't gamble, Rich said with a straight face, and I have met the, what'd you call it? The mastermind. That spider thing, it's in charge, I'm positive. Tell us more, I requested. He shuddered. I knew how he felt. Theory was one thing, close contact another. So far as I can tell, the spider thing has real intelligence, he said. It spoke in clear English. I wasn't about to doubt him after my experience with the imp back on Phobos. What did it say? Asked Arlene. Well, first it started asking me questions. It started with simple, yes, no, true, false. I tried to lie a few times, but it already knew a lot, and I got caught. Quote, what was its response to a lie? Rich shrugged. Didn't seem to care emotionally, but it punished me. Horrible stuff, but all hallucination. You know how you're having a dream, and you dream that you're absolutely terrified. The Spider-Man thing can do that. I can see why people who encountered one of those, maybe thousands of years ago, could think they'd died and gone to hell. He shuddered at the memory. But the fears were all unreal. And after a while I realized I could take it. You just have to accept being afraid like you've never been afraid before, but if it can't break you with fear, it doesn't know what to do next. What did it do to you? Quote, it started ordering me to reprogram all the Phobos and Deimos equipment. When I refused, it tortured me with more and more fear itself, which is what I started calling the hallucinations. When that didn't work, it hung me from the ceiling with its webbing, like it was saving me for later. I got the impression it needed to find out more about humans so it could figure out how to crack us. Meanwhile, I think it went looking for a more cooperative programmer. I'm sure it would have killed me when it found one. To find out more about humans, I repeated, feeling a chill. Arlene, do you think all this crap that's been thrown against us? She glared at me, then glared at the deck. She knew what I meant, she knew it made sense. We had been the secondary information sources. Had we given the mastermind anything useful? Modern day, I hope not. Describe the monster, Arlene said. Rich gritted his teeth. It's like a huge brain-like thing inside a mechanical, spider-like body. What about the weapons? I asked. Ringed with more weapons than you can imagine, Rich said. I doubted that. I'd reached the point where I could imagine quite a lot. Actually, I was glad to receive Rich's news. A leader alien meant we had something to really fight. I was exhausted cutting off the inexhaustible limbs of this army. I was ready for a general. The new information cheered up Arlene as well, bringing color back to her cheeks. She and I didn't need to talk about it. We were on the same wavelength. We shared our theories with Rich, especially the one about Deimos as a spaceship and what we had discovered about the hyperspace tunnel. He had already guessed a lot. Then we continued our journey up the ring finger, where we'd seen the shack. We ran into one specter, hardly a match for the three of us. I couldn't help contrasting our casualness now with my terror at seeing my first zombie. Nowadays, I was almost blasé. We prowled our way up to the ancient, crumbly, wooded hut. Hell needed a facelift. Check out the lock, Arlene said, grinning like a girl with a Christmas of accessories for her favorite doll. I love these. Why? I asked. They take an old-fashioned key. I'll help you look for it, Rich said before I could. Hell with that, she said. I've already got one. She dismantled one of the pistols, then she took the gas expander stabilizer spline for a flexor and the fixed end of the magazine advance spring for a tensor. It took her just 5 minutes to pick the lock. Where'd you learn that? Rich asked. I read a lot of comic books. You need help putting that back together? I asked with a straight face. I couldn't resist teasing her a little. She rolled her eyes and reassembled the piece. In nothing hat. She made us wait until she was good and ready to open the shack door. Inside was a switch. Surprise, 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 as our patron Saint Gomer might say. Arlene did the honors, lowering the wall ahead, revealing a hidden platform containing a dozen dead, mangled, squashed imps and a teleport pad. It's about that time, she said. I want a new travel agent, I said. We teleported and stared, stunned into angry silence. We were right back where we'd started after crawling down the hyperspace tunnel. The only improvement was we still had our clothes and weapons, and rich, of course.